Hello friends, I come to you today from my reading nook, which is in front of my wall of eBay junk for my father-in-law's estate. Something I am truly tired of mentioning in any way, shape, or form. One thing that I have learned about myself that is an unusual fun fact is that I have kept pretty much every notebook and sketchbook and stray piece of paper from my 30 years of writing about the same fantasy world. I have a video about the origins and development about this fantasy world that some of you have seen. It started when I was 11. Several of you have requested more about the world, and one lovely soul even asked if I could publish all of the sketchbooks and notebooks, which there's way too many of them. But it's a beautiful day, and I thought it might be just a nice, chill, and probably somewhat hilarious endeavor to look through some of these old notebooks and see what kind of gems were in there from the early days of my world building. I realized as I was going through them that I had handily numbered them in chronological order approximately. So I just put them in a pile based on which ones are the oldest to the latest. And I'm just going to look at some of them and pull out some of the most interesting and terrible parts. So let's see what we can find. This notebook is pretty early, so most of the early stories in it are not from my fantasy world. They're more just kind of standard middle grade at the time. A lot of them were like these stories that would just start with a scenario and then they describe a whole bunch of like child characters and their hobbies. And then from there, I would have no idea what to do, and I would stop writing. At this point, I was probably like 10. These are the main characters from the story that are supposedly from 1927. Yeah, wait, one of them's wearing a Ninja Turtle shirt. I guess I need to read the whole thing in detail if I want to understand what the heck is going on here. But I swear it started with the year 1927. Then we have my attempts to write Barn Girl, which obviously it was more important to me that I get the initial presentation right than to actually write any of the story. Here is an attempt at an autobiography of myself, apparently called Oh Man, That's the Story of My Life, including this amazing picture montage. And did I write any of the story of my life? No. I wrote like one paragraph about how my parents were poor when I was born. I guess that was my attempt at like, oh, this is how I'm going to set up a good narrative. And another one where I put a lot of effort into the picture, and then guess how many sentences I wrote of the story? 2. About halfway through the notebook, we finally start to hit my fantasy world in its very earliest incarnations. At this point, there was a main character named Jonathan who was basically a total ripoff from the Xanth books. And while Jonathan the Zombie Master was in the Xanth books, in here we had Jonathan the Dungeon Master who lived in the Dungeon of Doom, which I should note, according to this, had a large freezer with ice cream flavored with poison or chocolate, frozen bugs, and beef blood and bones for soup. In fact, lest you wonder whether this was ripped off from Xanth, I even made a chart of all the things that are different about my world, but are also like kind of the same. I like how we went from 3 types of dragons to many types of dragons. Also, what the heck is the rocket Neurotron? But they did have sex ed. We have this very splendid artwork, which I'm not even sure if this is Xanth or drenal, which is what the world was called at this point. This is pretty much Good Magician Humphrey, so this might be a Xanth thing. And then I had a list of characters, I guess. I don't remember, like, Steve. I don't remember Steve. I don't remember Vera, who was just sexy. I mean, I don't remember Margaret. I honestly only remember that Maldor was the inventor. We get some good old Final Fantasy fanfic here. This is apparently the daughter of Golbez. And they were, I don't know, sea people? I also love how I tore the page and then I decided that I'm just going to go with that and write around it. So this is part of what has to be one of the earliest attempts at writing a story that takes place in this world. I followed the Xanth convention of having these demons who would have names that started with D and then had like sort of a pun going on. So this dangerous demoness lady was called Deal with Don't, like deal with don't. What a great pun. I'm so amazing. But funny enough, that character ended up sort of just like kept going, and she's still in the story to this day, only she's just called Allwith now. But the origins of her name are extremely silly. Obviously, if you were expecting anything really genius from stuff that I wrote when I was 11, you're about to be disappointed. The story of Dalaran. In this story, Dalaran's father is Dorn, another character who is still around to this day. About the only thing that's still the same is that he has dark curly hair. But in this story, Dalaran was Dorn's son, and they were playing Monopoly. Truly, this writing is like almost unreadable. I didn't even know what a paragraph break was at this point. I do have to note this great sentence. Dalaran aged himself to 12 physically and maturically one day. Yep, somebody discovered ElfQuest all of a sudden. Why the heck was I just drawing Ekawar? Like, of all the characters to get into, I'm going to get into the weird old man. Yeah, suddenly the ElfQuest vibes hit hard, and everybody looks like ElfQuest characters. In this story, I think I experimented with writing things out in the language that I was inventing. So that's fun. The good thing about this point is that I had learned about paragraph breaks. So the story at least becomes a little more readable. Don't fear me, I'm just a hermit who likes death. I'm not evil, Jonathan assured her. Would you like a horse? I mean, sure. And apparently thinking I would fill in some of the blank pages later, in 2002, I attempted to write a poem from the perspective of my character Det, which is truly one of the most terrible things I can think of. I wanted to see more blood. My dreams were colored with it too. In my dreams, I slashed and crushed and destroyed. I dealt justice like a god, and the cries of my damned had lost all humanity. Stuff like that is definitely why people burn all of their notebooks. We are now on to the second notebook. What amazing stories will this one hold? This one opened with a description of all of my previous phases, and then says, now drenal, the best of all, where coffins, graveyards, death, and sorcery hides in every nook. Bats are a man's best friend, and zombies are beautiful people. Certainly some elements of this still carry on. Here we have some of my early attempts at like elfy characters, but I hadn't discovered ElfQuest yet. And then we have the 16 main gods of Drenal. I'm pretty sure what happened at this point is that I read Piers Anthony's Incarnations of Immortality series. Having read all the Xanth books more than once, I needed to move on. So now suddenly we had all these gods and goddesses, and I started thinking about having a god of death involved. Now here it looks like Dorn is still the god of death, but I know that in like a hot second we were going to have truly, well, okay, here he is. Death, the god of honesty and hospitality. Okay, why is he not the god of death though? He also gets Queen Carmine's very handsome rating. We get more various gods and goddesses who will never, ever be seen or mentioned again. Like, we're this Viking. I like how incredibly half-assed the artwork is here. Like, I was just so deeply uninterested in drawing this man. Goddess of the Hunt, the very intense face. More of these bird girls that I can't seem to stay away from for some reason. Goddess of Passion. Again, you can just feel me giving up on the entire endeavor. Lightworlder girl housekeepers. The opposite of the Dark Worlders that I was writing most of my stories about was the Lightworlders, and presumably they probably were going to be the insipid characters. At that point, that was usually how I would pose things. There was like the underdogs who were like sort of dark but really just misunderstood, and then there were kind of like the suburbanites. Okay, apparently they're going to give her a makeover. The ear tips have got to go. They're going to cut the tips off her ears because her ears are too long. It's incredible. No pain, but I'm still fat. Oh, the 90s. What a time. We were really absorbing some toxic messages here. We gotta corset her up. How dare she be fat? And we have, oh, Anita now. Oh boy, she looks so much better. Can you even tell that her ear tips are shorter? And we were drawing some more goddesses. Juliet, the goddess of rebellion, who pretty much just looks like that one fiend from Final Fantasy IV with all the hair swirling around her, whose name slips my mind at the moment. And Goddess of Chaos. This does look like she's having a hard time. Goddess of Terror. These are kind of getting an almost tarot card sort of vibe to them, like this surreal, multi-legged girl with hair blowing in her face. Can I just note how long it has been since I've looked through these notebooks? There is so much embarrassing stuff in here. I really did not check anything beforehand. This is all just off the cuff, and I am discovering some of these ridiculous things. I probably last looked at them I showed some of them to Dade when we were kind of early on in our relationship. All right, here we're getting the story of death. This is quite succinct. Paul Pierre lived on planet Kirkornen, where our ancestors came from. I don't remember that. One day he met a woman in a black dress. He fell in love with her and she with him. They stayed together for 20 years, but when Paul was 53, he fell ill. When he was 54, he was on his deathbed. The woman came. She asked if he would wish to live a long life. He said yes. Would he like to be young again? Yes, he said. Would he mind some severe penalties? No, he said. Probably should have asked what the penalties were, but... Would he mind never seeing her again? He hesitated. No, he whispered sadly. So be it, she said. She kissed him passionately. You will become death. You will never be able to break free unless someone agrees to these 3 questions. Long life, young again, and severe penalties. And the man became death. He in time forgot his name and old life. He became depressed at some penalties. But his life was so full, he didn't mind. He met 4 people who were his friends. Dorn Demon, Dialwithdount, Paul Genie, Fairy Elf, and Marie Mummy. And that is his story. We just kind of blew through that one. Oh, I just got to scribble that one out. And we have, oh, the elf girl with the fishnets. I remember her. The strangest people, plus all skeletons. People who are trapped in a certain situation. What is it? Crying on a boat. We have a guide to the clothing of Drenal. Jonathan, the first character. He's got a shirt, a tunic, black pants, and little shoes. Did I continue this? Kind of. We weren't getting overly fancy here. Uh-oh, the death rule book. Wow, okay, there's a lot of penalties, actually. He can't have children, nor adopt or raise someone else's children. He cannot spend more than 48 hours with a child a week, or it would be raising without being paid for it. Okay, so you can hire Death to be your babysitter. Oh, and he cannot get together with the ladies or men more than 6 times each year, or children will want to come. He may not use his stick thing for limbo. He cannot wear anything that has to do with the Old West. Why? Was there a problem with the past Death just wanting to wear a cowboy hat constantly? Death may not wear any color except black, with the exception of his belt. Oh, maybe it was a Western belt buckle. Death may not carry any swords of light. Death may not put anything that produces light in his pockets. Death may not let his hair grow past his shoulders. You damn hippie. Death may not go on exercise shows or talk shows. Oh gosh, there's so many more. Death may not be seen out of his robe in public, except to his immediate friends and family, or for that matter, none of the others' gods can be seen naked or in underclothes in public either. Death may not purchase any sweating the oldies videos. This was a real problem at this point in the humanity timeline, is sweating to the oldies. It was threatening everything I held dear. Death may not have an affair. Death may not have sex before marriage. Death may not get more than 2 pounds overweight. And once again, the fat shaming in the 90s. Death may not let others see the rule book at will. Death may not wear a dress under any circumstances, unless a girl. The 90s was also, sadly, not a time for gender nonconformity. The fact that I ever wrote this, though, is kind of sad. Death may not wear a cross or other religious symbol unless a dark religion. Death may not break a rule, or he will be erased from existence. Death may not speak fondly of the Brady Bunch, especially Alice. What? May not marry more than one spouse at a time. Death may not live more than one season in drenal. And then for some reason we will end this with whoever they are. I was getting very involved with this artwork. Until I suddenly felt that I lost my touch, I guess. Just a lot of working on the headshots of this handsome man who meets Queen Carmine's standard of approval. Oh yeah, baby. Yeah. Oh, who are these people? I have no idea. These are, oh, there's Kramer. If you watched my earlier video, you will know that I had children based on the Seinfeld kids in my Dark World or universe. Like how we have death against a backdrop of people surfing. The Complete Drenalian Guide to Brats and Troublemakers Etiquette by the National Brat Association. Oh no, I didn't write anything. Oh, okay, here we go. Dining is an excellent time to show off your bratism. Well, that's probably true. Place food, Barney figurines, and other disgusting objects. If you sit by a sibling who is a sewing project, you are very lucky. Saw off his or her leg when she is not looking. It will fall to the ground and provide quality mealtime amusement. The sewing projects were the early incarnation of my doll people. Okay, and here we have kind of the ultimate in 90s body shaming culture, in which I'm going to put all of these ladies in some kind of swimsuit pageant and critique their bodies. That's so charming. What a wonderful culture we had at this time. I was really into developing like role-playing games at this point, so here's just kind of a bunch of characters. What game were they from? What was the idea? Who are these people? No idea. All I can surmise is that tarot skill was going to play some kind of part in this game. What is happening here? Before and after? What happened to him? Yes, that's what I want to know. I'll teach you about drenal. Here's how they kiss, and here's how they... Oh, how cute. Let's have another. Help! Okay. Then we got into ElfQuest. What is with the crotch grab? I got into ElfQuest and I had these elf characters. I mean, what is this such terrible artwork? And I hate these characters so much. They have to be the worst out of all of them. Everything about them was so bad. But here we have Frida and Epro and one of my many let's draw their photo album in which they're through different eras. Is it any wonder that I love the opening of What We Do in the Shadows? Because I was always doing stuff like this, where I would do some kind of photo album. I like to know, oh my god, it's me and Jan Marshall. Oh, we look like Earthlings. Oh god. If you've watched my other world building video, you'll know that my world has kind of like a relationship with our world where we don't know about them, but they have been borrowing culture and technology from us for like 140 years at this point. This plays into the story quite a bit, and I have explanations for it, but early on it was just kind of thrown in and I had no idea why. I just really wanted to throw in the pop culture that I knew about. So I would just kind of randomly draw characters like being in the 70s or knowing about Barney and Sweatin' to the Oldies for some reason. And I wouldn't think about why that was. When you're a kid, having fantasy elements and the stuff that's familiar in your day-to-day coexist doesn't really seem that strange. But then over the years I had to go back and figure out a reason for it because it slowly became so ingrained into the story. And this was Epro's origin story, which I just have to note this part here. My teacher was a mean old crone named Mrs. Bean. She mercilessly beat me and she hated me because I knew a lot, though I was but 2, and she despised me for it. It was a real theme of mine back then to have characters that were like super smart from the time they were practically born, and for that reason they're misunderstood and mistreated by everyone around them. Gee, I wonder where that kind of concept came from. It's like the smart little kid's revenge for not having any friends or something. You know, Reinhardt's face as he's listening to Geese Outside. Oh, baby. A George Burns reference. You definitely don't see that with the kids these days. Death decides only men who can beat him can be enough protector for Frida, so he proposes a fight with Ebro, not guessing Ebro would come out on top. This is the throwing characters under the bus stage of writing new characters, where you were super into this death guy, you know, like just a few pages ago, and now he's like getting pinned down by your new character and looking like a total bonehead because you're just done with him. And it's probably only been like a month in my life. But hey, he got a shot in. Oh, my amazing art with action scenes. I don't know what's going on here, but it is a lot. I mean, besides that, we have a Winnowill ripoff from ElfQuest. Yes, we had to have this Winnowill moment here. But then it just descends into stuff. Okay, and then we've reached the age of the Tildak ripoffs. Tildak is the winged character in ElfQuest. And I was completely enthralled with his character design, which I'm still kind of using to this day to a certain extent. Okay, I am filming more of this notebook tour video on a different day. I've just kind of been squeezing this one in, kind of piggybacking on other videos whenever I have the time. So I'm going to go through a few more. Probably after this I'll just cut it off, and if you enjoyed this video, maybe I'll go back and do some more. Or maybe even if you didn't enjoy this video, I'll do some more just because it's nice to have a record of this stuff in case my house ever catches fire or something. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. Just got ourselves some random elf heads here. Love this awkward, love this awkward open mouth angry face. And here's, yeah, I love this mouth apparently. This was definitely like the Nightmare Before Christmas to ElfQuest transitional period. We had girl with skull thing. This was Frida. She was one of the dark elves. You know, dark elves. And then you still had these skeleton girls. But pretty soon, the skeleton girls would be out of the picture, never to return, I'm sorry to say. Had the random Egyptian character. I can't remember what the heck the inspiration for her was. She might have been a mummy, I don't know. There was a Gorgon character that was definitely ripped off from Xanth and Lyra, who will reappear probably someday because her like family line is still being written about. That brings us to the end of this notebook, having a little Egyptian moment that would never reappear again. Okay, we're on to a new notebook now, and this one was dated Easter 1994 in the beginning. I think it is actually slightly before the previous notebook, at least in these beginning pages. I tended to have several notebooks going at any given time. I'm still like that. So this one has this thing, the New Way, which I assume is some kind of new administrative system that different characters are going to be the lords of various places. Edgar and Carmine Rainbow still are kind of in the story to a certain extent, albeit with very different names and roles. And just another little thing where certain characters have lingered on in the background all these many decades. There was a brief centaur moment, thanks to the Xanth novels, that I don't remember whatsoever. I can only assume that all the characters were involved in some kind of war, and that had something to do with the New Way. The ever-popular clothing diagram. I love to draw these. Lots of armor fashion going on. Have a little best friends montage. Shima and Fiona. I don't remember these characters at all, but they both seem to be some kind of water elf. Here we are on a hot day. Here we are going to battle on some really wonky looking horse creatures. And then we have shopping, where one of them got some kind of crazy art piece and the other one got a Barney t-shirt. You know, as one does. Here's an unsent letter. I have a lot of these, which is kind of great because you can tell what I was into at the time. This is addressed to Julie, who I assume was it was definitely my Aunt Julie, because it starts with, "My mom said that you would like it if I would write to you and tell you about what I am reading and send samples of my work and stuff." I wonder if my aunts really cared about any of that. I thought that sounded great. I love to write about what I read and to let people read what I write, especially my stories, so I'll do it. What she brought up with Piers Anthony, that's really nice, because I really love to talk about his Xanth series. She said you wanted to know what they were or something like that. I wish I could remember what she said. There were a lot of Xanth books. I believe 16. Oh God, how many did there end up being ultimately? So I talk about the Xanth books for probably too long. Listed all the titles, of course. Well, I sure went on about that. Let me tell you about something different now. First, there's The Sword and the Sorceress. They are short story collections. Marion Zimmer Bradley collects them, and she's made a lot of volumes of them, up to 11 at least. One of the first things I ever completed was a short story, a very short story, to submit to The Sword and Sorceress, because it said in there somewhere that it's good to begin with a really short and funny story. So I wrote one that was super short, not super funny. It was probably super stupid, but I never sent it in because I was super chicken. Then there's Celtic and Norse magic, each a different book, which tell how to do magic and rituals and how to use herbs, and about Celtic or Norse gods and goddesses. In the same area, we have Wise Child and Juniper by Monica Furlong. Anybody remember those? They were good. Then there's Blood of 10 Chiefs. Those are the ElfQuest short stories, and the Enchanted Forest series, which several of you have brought up on my YouTube channel. Involves a princess who hates being a princess, so she goes to live with a dragon voluntarily. Unheard of. Those are very funny. And I concluded it with Shade and Sweetwater, because you gotta throw in a nerd reference to whatever you're into at the time, which in this case was an ElfQuest reference. So I've been going through this notebook, and a lot of it is just random ElfQuest stuff. There is a attempt at a novel adaptation of an ElfQuest comic. There is an ElfQuest play. There are a lot of random lists of ElfQuest characters. And then there's just my own very embarrassing attempts to write sort of knockoff ElfQuest characters. And I have this letter here that was also unsent to my pen pal Meredith. I am the one who got Meredith into ElfQuest, and of course I was super excited. This is like the great triumph of one's 12-year-old life, to get somebody else into the nerdy thing that you're into. So I started writing her this long-ass letter about all the incredibly stupid characters that I created at this point. I've been making some elves myself, and I thought I would tell you about them. Probably a good thing that I never sent her this letter. They live on another planet, which is not ElfQuest. It's the same planet in the story I'm writing that I told you about. One's from Night's Darkest Shadow, but the elves aren't really dark and don't have much to do with the Dark Worlders. Here they are. I must say that I almost completely have vanquished all traces of these elves from the story, but the one thing that lingers is the telepathic powers. When I look back at them now, I'm just like, it's so much cringe to me. So this was Epro, and I, like, looking back, I absolutely despise Epro, like, as much as you can possibly despise any character. He was about the first blind character I created, which I later ended up kind of wrapping the idea into the world that a lot of characters end up losing their eyesight for reasons that sort of make sense, that I won't get into now. But because of this, I eventually ended up doing a ton of research on blindness, whereas he was just your typical character. He's blind, but his magic enables him to mostly do everything he could do and more. And he's the best archer of all elves. I can't stand this trope now. It's so obnoxious, and I don't know why everyone is drawn to do it, including me, but I guess it's just something in the human psyche that we have to write the character who can exceed their disability. I also had basically just discovered the idea of physically disabling my characters. ElfQuest had a lot of characters that were like injured in some way, so I had Sperry Huntress, who only had one arm. She's ravishing. Her rival is Yiffa, but aren't killing each other, they just get testy. Knowing me at this point, they were probably fighting over a man or something stupid like that. Then we had the early iteration of the Winged Elves, who at this point were just a complete ripoff of the Winged Elves in ElfQuest. I hadn't made really any changes yet. The only problem is when people see my pictures of him, they say, she's cute. This would be a recurring theme of all time, people assuming the genders of my characters and getting it wrong because I tended to write rather effeminate looking men. And here's Yifa, the rival. She's a pretty mer elf. Her life was simple until she met and recognized Skyflight. She fell in love, but they couldn't be together until she discovered the secret to giving herself legs. Oh my god, it's basically Between the Sea and Sky before I wrote Between the Sea and Sky. And here's where we get extra meta. One Eye. One Eye is just straight up an ElfQuest character, and I like how I start to describe him. One Eye was captured on a pirate ship when he was only about 20. The Pirate Queen's favorite ElfQuest character. And then I just it's like I started to realize how stupid this sounded, and I just completely gave up on the entire pen pal letter. Here's just like a really chaotic art montage. I mean, you gotta love the bleeding through of other artwork through this notebook paper and this dramatic, you are the one who kept me from going mad, and you are the one who gave my life purpose. And then, like, what the heck is all this going on down here? There's some, like, more ElfQuest stuff. There's, I don't know, a lot of thought bubbles. And, like, the next couple pages are even more, like, what the heckity heck is going on here? Like, especially this mermaid, what kind of activity is this? And more of this meta action that one of my characters is reading the ElfQuest Quest's End book, which I started to try and draw and then gave up on. Oh, the X-Men radio show. There's a new contender obsession on the scene all of a sudden. You know that thing where you just, like, even though you haven't seen this art in a million years, you just instantly are like, oh yeah, that's what I copied. And yes, that quickly we went from ElfQuest to everyone wearing, like, these skin-tight superhero outfits. Of course, this is not that surprising, considering that ElfQuest itself was conceived from Richard and Wendy Peeney meeting each other in the pages of Silver Surfer comics, so there's definitely a bit of connection there. I mean, Wendy had already created ElfQuest, but obviously it probably would never have come out the way it did if not for Marvel Comics. Okay, so we're on to the next notebook, and as soon as I open this one, I'm getting that vibe that I've just read The Mists of Avalon, because suddenly my writing style has changed, and it just feels like a little more pretentious. Like this, clinging to him for security like a small child. It'll work out, Aren whispered assuringly. You know it won't. You know more than anyone, Moonwillow said, her voice failing. She burst into hot, noisy tears. Aren stroked her long brown hair like he would a frightened kitten. And Moonwillow started to purr quietly. Aren laughed happily, startling her. I didn't even know most elves remembered how to purr. Elves purring. Originally, just as an ElfQuest, the elves were descended from wolves, kind of like one of the, like, old high elves had mated with a wolf, so all the Wolf Rider elves that are the main characters had wolf blood. So naturally, I was like, oh, my elves have cat blood. And, oh, he's going to sing her a song. Aren was a character that I hate now almost as much as I hate Epro. He's like this stupid bard who he's just wimpy and annoying. Like, he's not wimpy in a good way. He's wimpy in a way that you just kind of want to smack him. But of course, at the time, I loved him. He had a wisdom and a wonderfulness that was a rare quality when it was so pure. And you know, when you look back on your old writing, if you have any old writing like this and you just wonder what the heck you were thinking, there's just something incredibly irritating about your old ideas. Well, Aren is definitely in that category. And of course, we're going on with all this high fantasy stuff. You'll die, you know you will. Do you not sense it? Moonwillow cried, her face tight with fear. I sense it, Aren said. I'll not die. I look like a normal elf, but to kill me, they have to discover that I am a robot. Because I was also reading X-Men, and I thought that I could totally throw, like, cyborg characters in with all this high elf stuff, which really, to this day, kind of explains a lot about my writing. And man, do I really not know what's going on with this art montage. We have, like, a cannon, splatting open a jack-o'-lantern, and then we have Scotty the elf dude holding the jack-o'-lantern on fire, and we have like the Sally ripoff character looking despairing, and skeleton girl crying, and then we have Zero, and here's a wren with a sword and another like serious looking elf face. So this is just like a total clash of influences, and I have no idea what, like, were they battling in Halloween Town? Maybe. And here is one of the many instances of me trying to like plan out an RPG, making maps, planning out what's going to be in all the things, writing all the dialogue. I tell you, why in the world could I not have had someone to play Dungeons and Dragons with? I would have been so into being a dungeon master when I was 12. And this goes on for so many pages. I devoted so much work to coming up with this entire RPG thing. You know, what else would have been great to have is RPG Maker. Talk about something I would have been into at the time. But the amount of work I put into this is astonishing because no one was like playing it with me. I had no way to develop it. It was just all written out for no reason whatsoever. Then we have this character who is from a race of people called the X-Wings. I had never seen Star Wars at this point, so I didn't know that that was an iconic fighter from Star Wars. I guess I was just trying to go with an X-Men theme, but make it different. The X-Wings have wings. And of course she has striped black and white hair, because why not? And like this amazing outfit with striped tights that go in two different directions. And then for pages and pages, there's all her tragic past. She was turned into a zombie, but things were already bad because, you know, the X-Wings love to induce pain on their sacred ones to harden them for trials and tests of will and body. You know, so a bunch of terrible stuff happens to her. And her name, what was going to be her amazing, glorious name with her striped hair and her wings and all this cool stuff? What kind of cool name is she going to have? Her name is Carol. Here is an interview with Carol. Are you seeing anyone? No. Do you want to see anyone? Yeah, I'm gonna try out some robot X-Wings. They're like a wren, but they've been slaves. A wren says they would probably like some friends. Have you tried any yet? Yep, he was a jerk. How many are left? 2 are left. One looks real cute. What? Try out? How many are left? Like, are these people? What are we doing? What are we doing to them? Let's have a little kitty break. Let's have a kitty break. How you doing, Reinhardt? Yeah. How you doing, babe? Oh, yeah. Show us that beautiful... Yeah. You want to squeak? Give me your fearsome lion roar. This story, I just have to call out for this amazing phrasing. She sniffed. There was greenery and winter smells, but no otter odors. Topic: X-Men fan club. I like how it had to be against the Might Morphin Power Rangers. Like typical nerds, we can't just have an X-Men fan club without being against some other thing. And we're going to put letters people send, I guess, in our fan newsletter. Talk about X-Men, have prizes. Talk about Nightcrawler. See what my real motivation was. Somebody has a new crush. Yep, here we go. The men. Franklin James Comantu, a new X-Wing character who undoubtedly is intended to be the love interest for Carol. I wonder if he has a tragic past. Frank was raised as befits the heir to the throne, but he never agreed with the X-Wings. He was murdered at age 105 and was resurrected around 30,000 years later as a cyborg experiment. He rebelled against his maker and was turned off and shut away for 2 years when Aren and Carol turned him on and he joined the elves. He is a chosen one of the X-Wings. Sounds about right. Who else we got? Fleur? Oh, he looks like he's had a rough time. Problems. Yep, we have a whole line for problems, but what's his story? Fleur was raised brutally by his demon mother. When he was 1, he was abandoned with his baby sister. He became a thief, while Tour a seamstress. tour left Fleur, and Fleur worked as an assassin. Sure, why not? When you need work, become an assassin. Then fled into the woods and lived like an animal. It was hard for Fleur after that. It wasn't hard before. His demonic look caused him to be beat and chased, and he was mute. Why? Why was he mute and could only send to elves and telepaths? He fled further into the woods until he met other elves and left with them. He soon found the world was merciless. What, he didn't already know that? He was irreparably injured when nearly his whole lower chest was blown away with a bomb by a crazy cult. He now works at a weapon shop with girlfriend Nariva. Oh boy. Can you imagine going to the weapon shop and finding a mute man who looks demonic and has part of his chest blown away? And then, of course, we have good old Aren. Aren has so many skills. You know, he's kind of the, you know, when you want to write a Mary Sue, but you like to write boys, even though you're a girl. Aren was an abandoned child from the world of evil who was raised on Drenal with 4 siblings that were born to his adoptive parents. His life was pleasant until he recognition is like the forced mating kind of thing in ElfQuest. He recognized Callan and a war started. Aren betrayed Callan for Roskane and then was murdered. Years later, Deb, a strange robotics builder, like Deb and Carol, we got some great names in here, used Aren's brain for a strong cyborg to do her bidding. Unfortunately for Deb, Aren didn't really want to do her bidding. He learned robotics, dismantled himself so he couldn't be remote controlled, and left Deb. He went to his girlfriend Lisa. Since then, Aren has embraced his fate and is still involved with Lisa. And here we have, in this very innocuous drawing, the first appearance, at least in this notebook pile, of my character Det, who was originally based on Setzer from Final Fantasy VI, but then kind of became this demon dude with, of course, his own super tragic past and a million tragic things happening to him. But at this point, I was getting older, and rather than just trashing characters every 2 seconds, I actually started to evolve them into more realistic characters. So this is the crazy early version of Det. Det has lost 3 limbs and has lived 60,000 years. They can regenerate 1 limb every 10,000 years. He can lose 3 more and regenerate them. You know, why not? At this point, it was all extremely wacky, but eventually Det would still be an extremely pivotal character in the story, and you're probably, if you're following my work, you're going to run into him at some point in a completely different version. Hopefully some of you enjoyed and possibly identified with this wacky little tour into my childhood notebooks. Sorry, the camera's rather shaky because I'm just holding it. I know this is not the kind of video that's probably going to be like huge and widespread, but it's kind of fun to look back, especially since I know it's unusual to have saved all your notebooks and papers from when you're a kid. And I have a feeling that a lot of you, especially if you're my age, but like whatever you were into for the age you were, like when you were 12, whatever was popular, you probably might have created some kind of wacky art or comics or fanfic related to it, and perhaps a lot of you lost it. But in my case, I have it all, so some of you might get a little chuckle of remembrance out of what it was like to be like 11 to 13. And like I said, I might occasionally do some videos with the rest of the pile and my sketchbooks. I could probably do quite a series of these, and you would see my world and characters evolve and get more sophisticated over time. But this was the early stuff. It was super goofy, and it's pretty interesting to see how quickly my interest changed and how like much I sucked up those inspirations and worked them into my story, and how little bits and pieces of them still linger to this day. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and if you want yet more of me, you can join my Patreon or my Substack. Free members get the weekly Q&A, and paid members get access to my Discord and my works in progress, extra videos, and stuff like that. Mostly I talk about writing and the creative life, sometimes fantasy world building, and then once in a while I just kind of throw a weird one in like this. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too, and I'll see you next time. Bye.